this is an update. This ship has been under construction for a number of years. Let's put it that way. So just to refresh your recollections, I don't remember when I did the last presentation, but it is in fact 1160, one of the early frigates that became identified as a super frigate later on, but it was built as a 50 gun, 1799, and you can read the rest. And famously, after taken over by the Brits, delivered the Rosetta Stone to England, where it now exists. My process in working on the 160 models is to complete the exterior and the lower deck, and then to move on to the foredeck. So this is the model as it now exists. Apart from showing the model as a whole, it also shows my favorite work stand, which is very useful when you're working at small scale because it allows me to tilt the model to work on it. And it's simply built up from what we call MDF, medium density fiberboard, but it's very, very useful for construction. And just a reminder, this is the stern, unusual for the period, which is 1800 basically, in that it was a little more ornate. I believe that is because it was somewhat in celebration of Napoleon's alleged victory in Egypt. And one notices when you start photographing these things that the right-hand false window mullions need a little adjustment. That's been done. So we're back sort of in shape. As I said, I prefer to finish the exterior before I go to the upper decks. The last part, I may have addressed this the last time I showed it, but I'll repeat it. The dead eyes, a problem at 1160. I wanted black dead eyes. Ebony does not tolerate really tiny carving or shaping or drilling. And so I would have to go with boxwood, which does tolerate it, and then paint it. Once I realized I was going to have to paint it, I decided to do it the easy way, which is rare for me to use styrene, but I did in this instance. And for the dead eyes, the ones you see here with copper strapping, with solder, low temperature solder, they're not finely shaped. They have to be thinned a bit and rounded. But this is the concept of the way I do it for these small items. The finished versions, 3 different sizes, which are the case on the channels of the Egyptienne. The other exterior piece, before I moved to the foredeck, were the anchors. These again are brass shapes, here in crude shape, soldered and in finished form. So that sort of finishes the exterior portions. Now, at least the sides, starting with the figurehead. This is an interesting subject. The figurehead, we know from the British drawings that were done after she was turned over to the Brits, that what she looked like. And we also have a painting when she was still in the hands of the French. So this figurehead is actually quite accurate with respect to those sources. I don't like it. I've never liked it. It is, as I say, accurate, but it is, to me, too linear and not powerful enough, if you will, far too linear for my taste. So I think someday I'm going to take her off and redo it with sort of my own aesthetics in mind. But for now, she is what she is. And we have her holding, for reasons I can never figure out, the rod of Asclepius, the doctor's, the medicine man's rod with the snake extending up it, which happens to be done in brass and painted. But I have no idea why an Egyptian princess who is looking in a mirror and admiring herself, also carries this thing with a snake on it. But this was very clear in the original drawings and painting. It also, this shot shows some of the complexity of the beak, if you will, and the different shapes that were used in it. So kind of an interesting head, but again, I'm not happy with the figurehead. And the next time I talk to you, I think she may be different. This is a hand pump, an interesting feature. No idea exactly why it was mounted here, but it draws from the sea. You can see down, it's faint and it's out of focus, but there was a pipe that went down to draw seawater. It was covered with protective battens. And presumably you would attach a canvas hose to it and clean the heads or use it to wash the foredeck. But there it was, and only on the starboard side, and a bit of an unusual feature. So this was the forward fife rail before it was installed. Interesting because it carries a large number of blocks, including the clinch block on the right-hand side on the screen, and shows her mounted at the foredeck. And now the foremast. I had discussions with some of you early on about how to show a mast if we're not going to rig the ship and we're not going to put full masts on. And there are various ways of doing it, of course. Some people like to leave it kind of rough cut at the top as though it were broken off. Some people use a slanted cut. I opted for a straight cut, just a stub, because I think the others tend to distract from the ship. This sort of keeps it as simple as possible, and your eye just follows it on down. In this case, it's the mainmast and the bowsprit, which we'll see in a second, have this front fish built in. Somewhat unusual. I haven't seen this on other French frigates at this low on the mast. But this is very clearly shown in various plans, and so here it is. And there's also a cleat device for the forestay, which you can see there, and ditto for the bowsprit. Now, I showed this before. This is a bronze howitzer. Which 4 of these were carried on L Egyptienne. And it poses an interesting problem because this is not an anti-ship weapon, unlike a carronade, which it's similar to, and certainly the carriage is a carronade style carriage, but it is a ballistic weapon, presumably intended to be used against short targets, because I don't think you could hit another ship with it. But interesting, in order to use it as a ballistic weapon, you need to be able to have it tilted upward. And so the railing at the fore end where this is mounted is hinged. I put a circle around it. It's very, very hard to see on the model, but it was hinged so that you could lift it up and tilt the howitzer to function as a howitzer as opposed to an anti-ship weapon. On the foredeck are 3 8-pound cannon, quite conventional, although surprising to me that they only were 8-pounders on this big a ship. But that's what they were. And I was able, by the way, to find some steel ball bearings of almost exactly the correct size for an 8-pounder ball. So they are mounted there. But usually in models, we don't have the train tackle shown, mostly either because it's an Admiralty style with the beams exposed and you can't really do it, or they make a mess as they would in fact in real life. I mean, they occupy a lot of space. But in this instance, I decided to put two of them in place rather than coiled. And so these are the train tackles extended into position. You can also see the chimneys for the stoves, which mount below, and a glue spot that is going to have to be cleared up. That's the fun part of these photographs. So just taking a quick look at the gun carriages at 1160, these are the parts for them. And note the large hole in the side, which is where the breeching is mounted or threaded through on the French version. Again, I'm not aware of any other Navy in 1800 that used this particular kind of breeching. This gives an idea of the size of those things. They're quite small. So in assembling these, I use a jig. And this one is made out of styrene. It allows me to set the pieces pretty comfortably in proper orientation, proper spacing, and it proved to be a very handy, particularly when I'm generating 50 guns overall. And using this kind of a jig, I'm able to at least assemble the basic elements fairly quickly. So the small capstan up front, the model is a little dusty, as you can see. Apologies for that. This is just created out of boxwood, painted. The belfry up front, I noticed that's going to need a little repair too. When you build a ship over a number of years, you have to go back and do a little touch up and catch up, and that's certainly part of what I'm doing here. And there's the bell of the belfry, just a brass turning with a little bit of detailing. And this is very tricky. This is the pin rack for the 9-pin blocks, which are a real challenge. Of course, these swivel are the real ones. Of course, have a pin top and bottom, and swivel a bit to some degree in use, and a good illustration of what they look like. They are very, very tricky to make in 1160, and I have to say I spent a lot of time figuring out how to make them, and at the end of the day, it just comes down to a lot of very careful handling and mistakes made and recovered from. And where I am, I'm taking a break from some of the details, and I'm going to work on the large launch for the ship. And this, of course, is the plug that goes in the middle, and it has to be sanded and shaped yet. But we'll then put the ribs over it, and then the planks over the ribs. So that's it.